Welcome, everybody, to tonight's class on gamma scalping. This is a preview of gamma scalping mini class that's coming up in 3 weeks. But even if you don't plan on taking that class, you should learn a lot tonight. Some of the videos, slides that you will be seeing are repeats so that there's familiarity, especially if you've been in pot for a long time. But about half of them are new, and some of them are probably doing a little bit better example of explaining gamma scalping than I did in the abbreviated Reader's Digest version that you get in a pot class. But what you're going to see is this is a really powerful strategy for not only standalone gamma scalping, as you saw us do twice this year, where we buy a straddle or a strangle and then we start trading stock around it. But it can be used for pretty much any position, even if gamma scalping is not your intent. In other words, let's say you have this big position on and you have vertical spreads here and time spreads. You've got iron condors, and all of a sudden it starts getting a little bit messy. And you notice that you have a pretty big gamma. Your deltas keep changing. That's not your intent, and you don't want to have to go and tweak 8 different positions simultaneously. Well, you can treat this whole thing as a giant portfolio and just gamma scope your existing position to make sure that any time decay or volatility collapse that you have as a result of market movement, volatility changes, change in days until expiration is taken care of. So it's really cool. But before we go any further, I have to go through the disclaimer. Just simply says we're giving out education, not advice. Please, please read all the disclaimers here and on our website before continuing. And by staying in this class, you are giving us the permission slip written by you or your mom that you are agreeing to participate and read all the disclaimers and obey by them. Now, tonight's session is hopefully being recorded. GoTo changed their entire format. I'm not sure if I'm digging it or not. We might have to change, but I'm a little rusty and I'm going to be fumbling around looking for my drawing tools and stuff, but it should be a minimal of inconvenience. As far as housekeeping is concerned, because this is a preview for the mini class and not your typical pot class, I don't want to go into too many housekeeping things and news and the calendar and everything else that we normally have at the beginning of a pot class. But there is one thing that I do want to touch on very quickly before we continue. And that's because at the end of the day, I put something in the end of the day update that piqued a couple people's curiosity, and we started receiving emails about it. Now, I don't know how many emails we got because Glenda is taking her kids to see Les Mis and blew out of the office earlier than normal. So if you're expecting a return email from her, don't expect it until midnight when they get back from whatever Les Mis is. But I do know a bunch of people were asking about this. In the end of the day update, I put down a lesson, an explanation of why I did a leg and then got out of it very quickly, and why I hedged it where I did, et cetera, et cetera. People are asking about this because I have mentioned that starting in June, we have a lot of changes coming up in pot for, and by that I mean improvements. And one of the biggest benefits of pot, I think, for people based on intuitiveness and responses from people is when we put on a trade, good, bad, indifferent, there's a lot of unspoken going on because I'm busy with something else or I'm answering people's questions. people's questions are going to start waiting until the end of the day unless it's time urgent. And instead, I'm going to focus more on writing up little 1 or 2 page lessons on trades when I have spare time to do it. Obviously, if the markets are going crazy, I'm juggling a lot of things. I can't be writing lesson plans. I'm too busy triaging major people's or major problems from people and worrying about finding trades and protecting the trades I do have. But on days like this where it's slow for good periods of time, half hour chunks at a time, and we do a trade like this razzle dazzle we did, I'll give you a little bit more insight into what I was thinking, why I did what I did, why I did it when I did it, why I chose this as opposed to something else. And I think that's going to be a, a 5 to 10x more benefit from the pot class. It's going to give people a lot of insight into what I'm doing. And hopefully, you guys enjoy it. We'll try it out. Again, this is going to be starting in June full time. I'm going to pepper it here and there, and you guys give me feedback. If you like it, you don't like it, how I can improve it, etc. Okay, enough of the housekeeping. Let's move on to tonight's feature presentation of gamma scalping. Okay, and again, this is a preview or an explanation of what people can expect in the mini class, but it's a standalone class too, so don't feel like you're being sold. If anybody is in here that's known me for 10 years, you know I'm the worst salesman in the world. As a matter of fact, I'm the anti-salesman. I don't want you buying it unless you want to buy it. I'm not going to try to push anything because I think that leaves a bad taste. I was at too many firms in the past, and I'm not going to mention names, but it was unbelievable. I'd show up and I was all of a sudden put in charge of this one company that had been around for a while, and they asked me to improve it and manage the traders. And I show up to a couple classes. Obviously, the classes I decided the venue were in Florida and Maui and Vegas, not Arkansas and and Utah. But I'd show up, and all of a sudden, in a room of 200 people, 50 people would get up and walk out. And I'm like, it can't be me. I know I showered this morning. I just happened to be walking in where people who had been taking the class enough times could smell a sales presentation going, and they decided they'd rather go and get a snack, go to the bathroom, etc. And nothing turned people off more than that. And I said, when I get my own firm, I'm not going to push sales. So don't look at tonight as a sales presentation. Even if you're not intending of taking the mini class, that's great. The only people that should be taking a mini class are the people who are dead serious on learning this particular strategy or the things that go with it. And the only reason I have these mini classes is because to do it in pot classes would take 8, 10 classes, and you lose something when you spread something over 2 months, as opposed to just going in a full classroom type experience. But that being said, one thing that Glenda did mention that is going to sound a little salesy, smell a little salesy, but it's not. Okay, it's actually a benefit to you guys, is that the early bird registration has been extended until May 25th, which is Monday. And why Monday? You could call it a Memorial Day sale, but in actuality, we've got a whole bunch of people that just heard about the gamma scalping class in our flyers and promotions that didn't know it existed prior to the early bird. And so they were sort of inadvertently penalized by not being able to save $100 by enrolling in the early bird schedule. So Glenda gave it to them. And now, when you give it to one, you guys remember from school, if you're going to be chewing gum, you got to bring enough for the whole class. At least that's how it was in my parochial school. So we weren't allowed to chew gum, but because I was a smart ass, then the nuns would say, if you got gum for a whole room. And I'd pull out 40 pieces. Let's chew up, people. And that really upset her even more. That being said, if we're going to give one person a discount, we got to offer it to everyone. So we're just extending it to May 25th. Now, why do you need to learn this? Why is this stuff important? That's a great question. I can answer it in four or five different things. Okay, there's four main reasons. And then a new one that came in because I do read, despite what some people think, I do read the emails that come in and I do respond to them. And when people come up with a great suggestion, I incorporate it. And there's four reasons, even if you don't plan on gamma scalping by its purest definition of why gamma scalping is important to learn. Now, the first reason is it makes you a better trader of all the strategies. Understanding gamma and your fight with time decay and how gamma and the market movement is affecting everything is of huge benefit. Every single strategy you do, other than a box, is going to have long or short volatility in gamma. So knowing it implicitly is going to make you a better trader. Second, most of you will always have long gamma position. For some reason, I would say 80 to 90% of my students are starting out with long gammas on every single trade they do. They like to buy trades instead of selling trades. When I started selling iron condors a couple weeks ago, it made a lot of people nervous. I'm going to start doing more of it because it's a good way of getting desensitized by selling premium when you have your coach on the sidelines giving you advice as opposed to just doing it by yourself where you just feel all alone and nowhere to run. So because most of the people are going to be long gamma, why not use that to your advantage? You guys have long gamma and it's benefiting you, and then you watch it disappear. And you're like, and you have no idea that there is a fix. Okay, now being able to scalp pat or part, if you have a proofreader, of an existing position lowers your risk and can increase your profit. Third reason, this is what the big boys do. Now, I'm not saying you got to be a big boy or act like a big boy just because the big firms like Susquehanna, CRT, O'Connor, and those big firms controlling the majority of the open interest in the SIBO floors are doing this. But you got to realize if these firms are making hundreds of millions of dollars a year doing this, there must be something there. They've got the brightest math guys figuring out options and how to profit from them. And they're settling on this strategy. Why? Why not just buy a call and hope the market goes up? They must think that over the long term, their business plan has a higher chance of success by knowing this stuff. Now, one of the great things about volatility is it does trade in a range. It's very predictable. It has a regression to the mean. When you go out and buy PLTR, and we bought it in our pot classes last year, and we were buying it in the 30s. Then it went to 200. Now it's in the 130s. Is it going to go back to 30 or is it going to go back to 200? I don't know. It's a tough call. It's much easier To trade a product that goes between 15 and 25, 15 and 25, 15 and 25, 15 and 25, always. And so, because part of gamma scalping is understanding volatility, and volatility trades in ranges, it's much easier than picking the direction of the stock. For example, what's easier to predict? The VIX that moves from 15 to say 25, or the price of McDonald's? The top is the VIX last 20 days, and the bottom is McDonald's over the last 20 days. Okay, you can see at the bottom that little red oval where it had earnings, the stock spiked up, then it went down after earnings, then the stock fell, then it went back up to kind of where it was prior to earnings, and now where's it going to go? I have no idea. But I do know when the VIX gets to the high end of the range, between those black dotted lines, I want to sell volatility because it's probably going to go back down. And when it gets to the low end of the range, I want to buy volatility. Now, that's just from the gamma scalping perspective. It's also really good to know this stuff, even if you're not going to be trading gamma scalping in its strictest sense, because you want to be cognizant of the fact that you're long volatility. Or if you find yourself trading when volatility is high and you don't know how to protect yourself, gamma scoping comes in handy. When you're trading and the market's going down and you've got good profits going, or you need to be long options to protect your portfolio, and now it starts getting a little bit scary, and you realize you own a lot of volatility on very high volatility. Gamma scalping can come to the rescue in terms of knowing how to manage that. It's makes life a lot easier than trading McDonald's. Also, why do you think the big firms trade this stuff? Literally, when I was on the trading floor, all the traders would get an assignment by the big boys on the desk. The guys upstairs who didn't go to the trading floor, they were the master of the universes. They ran everything. And they would send their floor traders down and say, look, if volatility gets down to a 15, everyone buy $50,000 worth of VIX. Or if it gets up to a 21, sell $100,000 of volatility. And that was the marching orders. That's what they wanted us to do for the firm. Now, anything we did on our own was fine, but we had to be cognizant of the fact of where volatility was. And then once we bought volatility or sold volatility, we had to start managing it by gamma scalping it to protect ourselves. Reason number four is predictability. This is one of the greatest things about gamma scalping. When you know what the big boys are doing, everything starts making a little bit more sense. Recall a couple months ago at the start of the war, and volatility just blew. And we were moving around, and all of a sudden, even though volatility was staying high, the ranges on the market started getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Why is that? It's because the big boys were having to gamma scope their positions. And every time the market would go down, they're buying massive amounts of futures. And every time the market went up, they'd be selling massive amounts of futures. And because of this phenomena, they're tightening the range themselves. Okay. So, in addition, as I said at the beginning of this, I take your suggestions and questions very seriously. We had one that came in that I addressed late last night and said, I'd like to see if Scott will consider presenting something in the gamma scalping class on long straddles going into earnings on individual stock. You know what? I have not done that before. It is an excellent, excellent suggestion. So, the outline that I showed you at the beginning of this class on what is going to be in the in the mini class is a little incomplete because I'm going to be adding, maybe 45 minutes to an hour on this. So when you guys have a great idea, I do take it into consideration, and I'm adding this to the class. So to the individual who brought this one up, it's being added. Now, wow, what's with the typos? I know I fixed this one, it just didn't save. Okay, my apologies. What's gamma scalping? That's a great question. It is kind of one of those terms that's like a little bit intimidating. You're like, I think I should know what it means. So I'm afraid to even ask the actual definition. It's not that complicated. All option positions, other than a box, will be long or short gamma, be long or short deltas, long or short volatility. But when the market starts moving, your deltas are going to change, volatility is going to change, and that is how much this stuff changes can be measured by gamma, and it can be hedged by knowing your gamma. Now, gamma scalping is just simply adjusting the options deltas as the underlying moves. So you buy, the simplest way of understanding it is you buy a straddle and the market moves up or down big. You expect to be making money. Why are you expecting to make money? Because the call or the put is going deep in the money. And let's say the market's moving up. Your call is going deep in the money and it's starting to act like long stock. It's gone from, say, $3 to $15 now. Every time the stock goes up a dollar, it's going up 80, 85, 90 cents. Meanwhile, the put is getting sticky. Every time the market goes up a dollar, the put's going down, say, only 10 cents. The reason why these options are changing how much they move as the market moves or as the underlying stock moves is a phenomenon called gamma. It is a Greek called gamma. And the beautiful thing about it is you can measure it very easily and you can hedge it very easily. Now, gamma scalping is just simply done to take money out of a position and offset time decay. Let me back up to our straddle. We buy the straddle, and everybody knows the painful thing about buying a straddle is the daily time decay. It feels very heavy, especially if you're going to own a straddle for a period of time and you have 1 or 2 days where the market's just dead. The market moves up, then it moves down, and then at the close, it's unchanged. And you saw your straddle lost half a dollar. Then the next day, you're like, well, maybe tomorrow the market's going to move big. So you hold out and you watch the market move up and then move down, and then we close unchanged again. And now the next day, that straddle loses 60, 70 cents of time value. Now you've lost a dollar, $10, $20 of time value on that straddle, and it's starting to feel heavy. That's when you really learn about time decay. Is when you own something, you watch it and you physically feel it rotting, and it just causing you discomfort. This mathematical inanimate object is eliciting a actual physical response, and now you learned time decay. So the beautiful thing about gamma scalping, whether It's a straddle, strangle, call spread, put spread, iron condor, BWB, etc., is it will have a time decay component that's either working in your favor or working against you. If it's working against you, gamma scalping can help offset that time decay. That's the purpose of it. I always say that gamma scalping is really a way of staying in the position until the miracle happens. For example, you buy a straddle because you think a big move is coming. You don't know which way it's going, but you know we're going to have a big move. Sort of like the question we had about earnings. I don't know if it's going to go up or down, but I suspect the big move's coming. Great. When's it going to happen? When is, for example, this war going to end? I don't know. It's ended like 29 days in a row. One of these days, it's really going to end and the market's going to move. Or they're, both parties aren't going to come to an agreement and the bombing is going to continue and it's going to move down big. So you can say, I don't know if we're going up because it's eventually going to end, or we're going to go down because Iran's never going to give up their uranium. But I want to call in case the war ends. I want to put in case the bombing starts again. I'm going to buy a straddle or a strangle and hold on to it as long as I can until the miracle comes where one of those two events come. Gamma scoping helps offset that time decay so that you can hold on to the position until what you think is going to happen comes to fruition. Now, there's a lot of positions out there that you don't even realize would benefit from gamma scalping, even if you're not starting out with the intent of gamma scalping. So, how does it work? How is all this benefit possible? We're going to have to go and for the next, say, 10 minutes, assume nobody knows anything about the Greeks so that nobody's lost. And if even you're pretty good with the Greeks, it may be a good refresher. So let's go. And some of you guys in pod have seen the next 5 or 6 slides. I do that on purpose because you see them again and again and again. It gets ingrained. I could just as easily make new slides. I'm not trying to be lazy, but repetition really helps. So when it comes to gamma scalping, the easiest way to understand it is just ignore 3 of the 5 Greeks. We're only going to focus on 2 of them. We're going to focus on delta and gamma only. Now, delta, you guys all probably should know by now. And it's really easy. It's just a measure of how much an option moves when the stock moves 1 point or the index moves 1 point. Long calls have a long delta, long puts have a negative delta. Long puts have a negative delta because when you buy a put, you hope the market goes down. And when the market goes down, you're making money on that negative move. Here's a quick example of delta for those who will benefit from it. Now, we have done 2 gamma scalping trades this year so far. Okay. One was beautiful in that we did not make money. We made, I don't know, $100 or something. Now you can ask yourself, why would Scott say you bought a straddle, you gamma scalped, and you made $100, and that was great? Because we bought a straddle. We owned it for, I think, about 2 weeks. I'd have to go back and look. And at the end of the 2 weeks, the market closed exactly, almost exactly where it started. And what does that mean? Well, right now, you could go off of a stock and call it, you know, we'll call it PLTR. Okay. Let's say you could go out and buy the 137 and a half straddle. Not that it exists, but let's say you just go on, and they have the 137 and a half call, the 137 and a half put, and they each cost $5. You hold it for 2 weeks, hoping for a miracle that the stock goes down to 35 or back to 200. 2 weeks from now, the stock's at 137 and a half. Your call went out worthless, your put went out worthless. You lost $10 or $1,000 per contract. Meanwhile, the stock did go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. You did not capitalize on any of that movement because you don't know gamma scalping, and the straddle goes out worthless. Anyone who's ever traded a straddle or strangle knows how frustrating they can be when you don't get movement, or when the market falls 5 points and you're like, you know what, this thing is starting to make some money here. On We keep going down from here. I'm going to hit a home run. And guess what happens? The next day we go up 5 points, right back to the starting point. Anyone that's ever owned any kind of long premium position knows how painful it is. It's same thing with call spreads. You buy a couple call spreads. Market goes up, you're making a little bit of money. Next day, the market goes down right back to where it started, where the day before. But the call spread lost a little money because of time decay. Very frustrating. That's what gamma scalping is for. So I said we did 2 positions this year, one of which we were only in for 2 days. The market started moving. There was a quick profit in there, and people decided to take a profit. The first one, though, we entered at the beginning of the year at a time that's notoriously boring. Christmas break, New Year's, etc. Nothing was going on. The market was not even moving. And I said, this is a great time to do a gamma scope. Why? Because the market's not moving, and you get to see how we need to protect ourselves when the market slows down. And every time the market went up, we would sell E-minis or SPY stock. When the market went down, we'd buy E-minis or buy SPY stock. And at the end, the straddle went out worthless, and our profits from the stock was astronomical, meaning enough to offset a straddle that went out worthless. So we only made $100, but had we not known how to gamma scope, we would have lost every penny of that straddle or most of the money in that straddle. So we did 2 examples, but the easiest way to understand it, and the best example I've ever done, not the most profitable, but the best example I've ever done, and I'm going to use this for the rest of my life, is in Facebook. Okay. It was textbook. It was, it was if I, it was if it was purposely designed just for a case study. So here, let's look at this. Here's Facebook. And you can see the stock at the top left corner is 168 essentially. 167.92 and a half cents. And you can see the 170 call is trading for 420. Okay. And let's look for the delta. The delta is 45. So when explaining deltas, which we're going into now, you can see to the right, I'll get a little ahead of myself for a moment. The gamma is 3. That means every time the stock moves a point, that delta is going to change 3 cents from 45 to 42 or from 45 to 48, then to 51, then to 54, etc. But backing up, just on only talking about delta, we have a delta of 45 right here. And let's say the stock goes up a dollar. What do you anticipate the call going to if the stock goes up a dollar, knowing its delta is 45? Well, if it goes from 148 to 168 to 169, the math is really simple. Okay. The ending price is simply the starting price of 420. You can see that above. Stock moved up 1 point, and its delta in decimals is 45. So when you blast that math out, it's 420 plus 45 or 465. That's just delta. It works the same way in reverse if the market goes down. Okay. Let's say the market goes, you buy it when the market's at 168 and it falls to 167. The math works the same way. But instead of adding 45 cents to the 420, we'll just subtract it out. Because as you see in red, we had a negative 1 point move. So now it goes to 375. And then puts work the same way, but they have a negative delta. So just make sure you keep your symbols correct. Now, as far as gamma, this one is a little bit trickier. It's just the first derivative delta. It's a measure of how much delta changes every time the underlying moves 1 point. So if we're dealing with long options, it always is long gamma. And if we're dealing with short options, it's always short gamma. And this one confuses people because as soon as they learn delta, they realize, okay, calls have a positive delta, puts have a negative delta, but now gamma, they both have they're both longs, both the put and the call are long. What's going on here? It's just a lot of stuff to memorize. No, at first it's memorization. Then you start understanding how options work and it becomes intuitive. Okay. Because options are just simply priced off the normal distribution curve. Okay. And as the underlying moves, so does the probability that a particular option will be in or out of the money at expiration. And I love this example. This is how I think. Okay. I'm a visual thinker. So this makes perfect sense to me. If I'm playing football and I've got to run into the end zone on the right with the football to get a touchdown, what are the, what do I have a better probability of getting? A touchdown with the ball on the top or a touchdown with my position on the field on the lower ball? Can I go 10 yards easier or 90 yards easier? Obviously, 10 yards easier. It has a higher probability of a touchdown. And I know there's one or two people here playing DraftKings and can watch this stuff go real time. Okay. They're watching it real time. And you'll see as a team playing football gets closer and closer down the field, the odds will change real time. The same thing happens with options. The math on gamma is super easy too. Okay. Real simple. Just remember long gamma is beneficial. It's a benefit. When you buy an option, you're buying gamma, and if the market moves in your favor, something that may have been 20% chance of success eventually gets to 100% chance of success. That's a great thing, but it comes with a cost or a negative. That negative is, or that cost is, time decay or volatility coming in. You buy a call or a put, volatility collapses, and time decay collapsing or coming in is your risk. Now, short gammas, the opposite. Okay. Most people view it detrimental. I kind of like it because I like getting the time decay and I like the volatility collapse. So when most people say I don't like being short time, premium because it's short gamma, well, I know how to manage short gamma, so it doesn't bother me. I know how to gamma scalp in reverse when I'm short a straddle instead of long a straddle. So I know how to protect myself. And those negatives that people say about short gamma scalping are positives. But if you sell an option, volatility goes higher, it's a negative. But you have time decay, bringing it right back. Because as volatility increases, so does time decay. The time decay gets bigger and bigger as volatility goes up. So volatility may go against you, but it comes back faster. Now let's go back to this Facebook straddle. Okay. Look at this. Look at this movement we had in just a couple of days or weeks. Huge moves. The market went from 168 to 149 and right back to the scene of the crime, 168. On April 17th, we were buying a straddle. Okay, now this is a few years ago, but in 20 years from now, until I find a better, cleaner teaching example, I'm going to keep using this. Now, look at this. We go on by the 167 and a half straddle 10 times. We buy the call for 555. We buy the put for 495. The two combined is 1050. That's a lot of premium, guys. That is a lot of premium. That's $10,500 in premium. Now, if you don't know how to protect it, it's starting to feel a little bit more like Vegas than science. Let's make this science. Okay, here's the starting position before we start moving. We own the 167.5 call. You see it's got a delta of 53, and we have 10 contracts, so that's long 530 deltas. We are long 10 of the 167.5 puts. It has a minus 47 deltas on 10 contracts. It's minus 470 deltas. So between my long call deltas and my short put deltas, it nets out to be long 60 deltas. I took this in with the long 60 deltas. I could have gotten delta neutral, which is the most overrated term I've ever heard. Okay. Everybody brags about delta neutral. There's sometimes you don't want to be delta neutral. It goes against you being delta neutral. Owning volatility is one of them. Okay. So why did I keep these long 60 deltas? Well, in the mini class, we're going to go into a lot of detail about it. But let's just say it's for this simple reason: the skew curve. If we're long premium, what is the risk of the market moving when we own premium? What's the risk of the market going up if we own a straddle? Well, not going up enough is one of them, correct. Okay. The best answer I've gotten so far is the correct answer is volatility falling. You bought a call, you bought a put, you bought a lot of volatility, you bought a lot of Vega. When fear dissipates, the VIX goes down, volatility goes down, and you own it. So it's going to go against you. You hope the market moves enough where the deltas pay for the loss in volatility, but it's hard to do, especially if volatility starts collapsing hard. And I've told this story before. Back in 2000 and during the dot-com bubble, when it was ending, I think it was ending in the middle of 2001, and we were at this giant number. The whole world was talking about this support level. I mean, the whole world, there's a lot of people that do technical analysis, but you don't hear about it on CNBC and in the newspapers and stuff. But the whole world was talking about if we broke these levels, the world was coming to an end. And I had a bunch of people, I was trading from home, and I had a bunch of people on a conference call, just friends who were trading, and we're looking for, some insight from me because it was a critical day. And we hit that technical number and it bounced. And then we started going up big. I'm like, guys, we just saw the bottom, sell premium, get long deltas. But whatever you do, do not buy a naked option. It's going to be tempting to buy a naked call. Don't. Well, one of my friends who's a professional trader, been trading longer than I did, was in the OEX pit, couldn't help himself, and bought a naked call in the naked calls in the DJX. This is when the market was considerably lower. He had to have the Dow go up over 1,000 points, which would be equivalent to like 4,000 points right now, before he could break even. Because even though he was long a call and the market was screaming to the upside, much in the same way we saw the market scream higher in the last couple of weeks, it did not go up enough to compensate for how much we were riding down that skew curve. So the reason why keeping those long deltas is important, and we're going to quantify how many long deltas to have in the class. This is just, general concept. So you get the idea. The actual science takes a lot more time. So it's obviously got to be in a mini class. But riding down this curve, let me see if I can pull up my drawing tools. They're in a different place. So let me try this. Riding down this curve. Volatility's up here. That's where you bought it. Now we're starting to ride down the curve, even though the market is going higher like you want it to, and you're making money on deltas, you're losing twice as much on Vega coming in. So he was fighting a headwind. And that's why I said don't buy a naked option. One of the solutions for not buying a naked option is also keeping a long delta. Okay. What we're also going to learn, and this is going to be a huge benefit for some people, even if they don't want a gamma scope. In the class, you're going to be able to predict volatility throughout the range. In other words, if the market goes down 200 points, where will vol be? If the market goes up 200 points, where will volatility be? If the stock goes down $15, where will its volatility be? There's a way of predicting it that you're going to learn in the class. Okay. So now we're in Facebook and it starts falling. We saw it started at 168 and fell down to 149. And it did so in a couple days. Had a 19-point range in a couple days. Now, what's your delta? Gets a little bit confusing. If you don't know, what's your position worth? Are you making money, losing money without just looking at the straddle price? How do you manage it? It's no longer the same trade. Yes, you're long a straddle, you're long the 167.5 straddle, but now the put's deep in the money. Is that short stock? And now you got an out of money call. How do you manage it? Gets a little bit confusing. Okay. As Dr. Phil would say, how's that working out for you? Well, what's happened is when the market was at 168, we put on the straddle and it was right in the middle of the normal distribution curve. But as the market fell, it took the normal distribution curve with it. Now that put and call are at the blue line on the right. The blue line is now on the left is now an orange line and shows you where the new at the money is. What does this mean? Your put is deep in the money and your call is far out of the money. That call, remember, we started had a 53 delta. But there's no way it's better than a 50-50 shot of being in the money right now because it's $19 from being at the money. It's $20 from being in the money. We have to go up $20 or $19 for it to be a 50-50 shot. So it's obviously a lot less than a 50-50 shot. Now, the put is going to be a lot more than a 50-50 shot of being in the money at expiration because it's $19 in the money. We could go up $17 and it's still going to be in the money. So our deltas have changed. Here's our deltas after the stock has moved. Okay. We started at 168. We ended up at 149. And what you're going to see is now with the stock at 149 in the yellow box, the calls have a delta of 0. And the puts have a delta of minus 100. It's no longer a decimal, it's a 1. So it's not 0.5 for 50, it's 1 for 100. So we go from starting of a 60 deltas to minus 1,000 deltas. What does the math actually look like? Here. What do you do in this situation? Well, the easiest way to hedge this, most people aren't going to do it, but the easiest way to hedge it and the way to learn it is with stock. Now, don't worry about the cost of stock. We're going to learn how to get around that in the mini class. But the easiest way to learn it is stock because it's just so simple compared to the detail you have to go into when hedging with options. So we're short 1,000 deltas. How do you get back your 1,000 deltas? You go out and buy 1,000 shares of stock. And I know the stock got down to 149, but no one's ever bought the bottom. Well, I know people bought the bottom. I've only done it once in my entire life, trading dozens and dozens of futures every single day for a gazillion years. And I've only bought the bottom once. And that was by accident. Okay. I just put in a market order and got filled at that bottom. It wasn't anything genius. Even today, when we were buying call spreads and we bought them at the dead bottom, okay, had it been a future instead of a call spread, I would have probably been off by $1 or 2. That being said, we go out and buy 1,000 shares of stock at 150, And then what happens? You guys hear me talk about it all the time when I say, well, I steal Robert Chastain's line. He comes up with the best one-liners, okay? He can name anything. He's very creative. And he came back with return to the scene of the crime, and it stuck. I think he used it for the first time in the Florida class, and it's stuck with people since. So we had a dead cat bounce or returning to the scene of the crime. We bought 1,000 shares of stock, and then all of a sudden the stock just took off. Now what's your delta? The easiest way to manage this position is not by dollars and looking at the price of the straddle and P&L. Okay, I made this on the call, I lost this on the put, I made this on the stock. Just know your deltas. So, what's my deltas after the stock bounced back to its original point? Well, we'll just take the same deltas we started with. Remember, the call, the 167.5 call was a 53 delta. The 167.5 put was a minus 47 delta. It's going back to those deltas. And we're long 60 deltas there, but we also bought 1,000 shares of stock. So now we have 1,000 shares of deltas and we have 60 deltas from the option. We have 1,060 long deltas. Okay. What do you think we do now? What do you guys think we do right now? We just, I'm not sure who was the first. Let me find out. Alan P, I think, was the first. Guess what? Welcome to the goodie room. You were the first one to answer correctly. We're going to send you out a t-shirt. Just let the office know you won, what size shirt, and where you want it sent. You can get yourself an official Stratagem t-shirt. Girls in New York paint top dollar for them. Okay. Someone's complaining that they were cooking dinner. They could have been faster. Well, guess what? Only those lizards with two eyes that move in different directions can multitask good. I can't. So I hope dinner was good. You lost a t-shirt. I'm just kidding. That being said, oh, Preston, I'll get you a mug, Preston. You've wanted that mug for a million years. I think we're out of them, but I do have one stored away. You can have the one they gave me. Um, we're having more made, but they're kind of a pain in the butt to ship. And that's why we stopped having them made because it costs like 10 times to ship them is what the mug costs. And then the overseas people always get like peanut brittle. Um, but I know the office saves me one of everything, like one bottle of champagne, one bottle of wine, one of everything. Um, so I'll give you mine. I don't care if mine is still around, hasn't been stolen or given away or broken. You can have mine, Preston. Just send me an email reminding me. Or drive up and get it to save me the $20 in postage. Okay, we're just going to profit after the unneeded deltas or stock shares are sold back out. So what happened? Remember, we bought the stock for 150. and now we can sell it at 168. We're gonna make 18 grand on the stock. Yes, we'll probably lose a little bit of money on the straddle because of time decay and volatility collapse and everything else. But the straddle didn't cost $18,000 to start with. Remember, the straddle was only costing 10,500. As long as there's time value, we can sell it back out. Even at $8, we'll get 8 grand back and we made 18. So we lose 2,500 on the options and we make 18,000 on the stock. That's why the big firms are gamma scalping. Then they just flip it over and keep doing it again and again. So for those who want a recap on the math, when we send you the slides, it's every single step. I'm not going to go into it. It's time waster, but some people get really technical and detailed and want to see the whole math. It's right there. Now, let's go into the advanced gamma scalping, okay? Where we're weighing our theta versus our gamma, okay? We want the stock to move up or down. That's the gamma effect. It not moving is costing us money by time decay. So there's this balance between time decay and gamma. And the more we move, the more gamma is going to beat theta. Okay. But we got to find a balance and we got to find a measure because anytime you buy a straddle, you guys all know what that looks like. But the problem with time decay is when you look at this graph and you see that red triangle, that loss area, the peak of that loss area of say down $5.10 is at expiration. We know prior to expiration that we don't lose all 510 of the premium we paid for this straddle. We lose a little bit every day. So what happens is the time decay on day one when we buy this, the position will look like the yellow line. It's beautiful. The market moves, we instantly make money. If it doesn't move, we usually break even. But then a couple days go by and it starts looking like the red line because of time decay or theta. Then a couple more days go by and it starts to look like the green line until it eventually forms the shape of that blue break even line at expiration. Okay. So one of the solutions is to keep along delta. Again, in the mini class, there's going to be a formula. How many deltas for the size of your position to maximize the the amount of insurance you need against riding up and down the curve of skew. Now, that's going to change a little bit because this curve changes a little bit. Okay. Now, here, this is the biggest question people have when they saw us buy 1,000 shares of $150 stock. They're like, I can't afford $150,000, even $75,000 on margin. This definitely is not my kind of trade. Well, I understand that. There is a solution. We did the first gamma scalping trade this with stock, SPY stock and shares, because it makes the math simple. The second one we did was with option hedges. For the rest of the year, anytime I gamma scalp something, unless it's to illustrate a point, I'm going to use an option hedges because most people don't have the money to buy and sell shares. So, what if you can't trade stock? We will come up with a solution. In a nutshell, just to make it real fast and simple, I don't want to make it too complex. I just want to show you guys kind of what we're talking about here. Let's say we're looking at the SPY when it's 604.33. And you see that the 605 calls trading for 4, the 605 puts trading for 430. Total 830 on that straddle. And let's say we go out and buy 5 contracts of each. So we buy 5 straddles. Pretty straightforward so far, right? Now, let's say we want to calculate the deltas. We see that the deltas on the calls is 53 and on the puts 47. So 53 minus 47 is 6 deltas. That straddle has a net 6 deltas times 5 straddles. We're long 30 deltas. Now, let's say that the market is falling and it's falling a decent amount, 6 points, like 60 SPX points. Okay. Well, your deltas are going to change. You want to not only know what the deltas are going to be, but a way of hedging those deltas to lock in some of this movement that you got. That movement is what you're paying for when you buy a straddle. So when you're buying a straddle or a strangle or any position, call spreads, put spreads, iron condors, what have you, you're paying that premium for movement. When you get it, you want to lock it in. You don't want to grab water with your hands. It's just going to seep out. Most people buying straddles or call spreads are trying to drink water with their hands as a cup. And guess what? You lose most of it. Most of that profit is missed. With the straddle or vertical spreads or time spreads, using a cup, you're going to be able to retain much more of that profit, the water. So let's say we want to find out what our delta is after the market moves 6 points lower. A very remedial, down and dirty way of looking at it is just moving strikes. And I'm going to do that for illustration purposes right here. You see that if the market moves down 6, our call is going to go further out of the money by 6 strikes, and our put will go deeper in the money by 6 strikes. So the call's delta went from 53 to 26. The puts delta went from 73, or from 47 to 73. So now our straddle has a net delta of minus 47. Minus 47 times 5 straddles is 235 deltas. What do you do here? Well, what this would normally say is go out and buy 235 shares of SPY. Well, that gets a little expensive. Even in this example where the SPY is cheap, okay, even with that, say 604, 235 shares of that is still $142,000 roughly. On margin, 71,000. John, you are faster than I am. I love it. That being said, what do you do here? How do you hedge? You don't want to buy 235 shares of stock. There's a lot of things we can do. And what is great about gamma scalping using options instead of stock is you can decrease your position or increase it to hedge. Let me say it again and explain. We started out with 5 straddles. We don't have to put any more money into this trade if you don't want to. When it's time to hedge, we can take money off the table. If volatility is getting cheaper or your instinct is telling you we're going to get a big move coming, I want to get bigger, or like I said today, hey, We're up 30. I don't believe this. The market's acting like the war's over. I think this is BS. We're going to go back down. I'm looking for a way to get short. I could go and get more. I could sell calls or, you know, or I could buy calls. I can, my deltas can be increased or decreased. So here, if I want to get shorter, I own five straddles. My delta is now 73. So what do I do? Well, let's just say we're going to pick on the same strike. We don't have to. But to make things easy for right now, because it's just a demonstration, if we take 73, okay, how many of those equal 235? Getting used to the new drawing tools. I apologize. They don't get any thinner. So if I have to get long 235 deltas, I need to sell three puts. Okay, because three puts, three times 73 is going to get me pretty close to getting rid of those long deltas. Or my calls are 26. I can buy 9 calls if I want to get longer. I'm thinking, hey, you know what? This move down was BS. I'm going to buy 9 of these calls, which are really the O fives, so that when we bounce, now I have 14 contracts of calls protected by 5 contracts of puts because I'm bullish anyways. So there's a lot of different cool things that can be done when you're gamma scalping using options instead of stock. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now because we don't even have to do that. We can convert things, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing or a little bit more difficult. Huh? I've got to sell puts. I don't have to sell the 605 puts that are now 73 deltas. I can go 2 strikes down, which will be the 603 put, which will be trading like 65 deltas. And now I'll sell the 65 delta put, okay, say 4 times, and I'm going to have on put spreads instead of closing down positions. So as the market's moving around, I can massage it into long put spreads and then long call spreads and have on a long iron condor maybe for free or a credit. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. This stuff obviously takes a little bit of time to explain and give the criteria, so that's why we have a 2-day class. Okay. But John D, you answered the question. You get a pick from the goodie room. Let the office know you won, what size t-shirt, and where to send it to. You were the first. Okay. And I got to come up with something new for the goodie room, just for gamma scalping class. Let me think. We got to put some more stuff in the goodie room. The girls are good at coming up with that stuff. They like shopping for this stuff. I'll let them do it. I just come up with the t-shirt designs because every time I come up with a t-shirt design, they say, "No, no, Scott, you're gonna upset people." Like the bull with the testicles hanging down. I got like all no's from everybody in the office. I'm like, good. Let's make a lot of them. Silver coins. No more silver coins. I can't afford silver coins. I don't know how many silver coins I gave away. I gave away those 1 ounce coins, but they were only costing me like $23 a piece when I bought them. Now they're going for like 110. I think we got a couple silver coins. I'll save it for something special. Yeah, it goes from the goody room to the greedy room. It's no longer a little fun prizes, it's you're trying to profit. We'll come up with something, Gamma Gummy Bears. We'll come up with something fun. Okay, now, if the market jumps 6 points, the exact opposite thing. It works the same way, but just in the opposite direction. It's nothing really cool hard. Need a Les Grossman shirts? Calvin! Um, I've got the coolest shirts ready, but I'm waiting for the lawsuit and giving them out later because I'm sure I'll get sued putting these t-shirts out, but it'll be worth it. Um, and I don't want to send them out too early. Les Grossman t-shirts. Hollywood would probably sue me for those too. And do people even know who Les Grossman is? Or am I the only guy who found him hilarious? And the only reason I found him hilarious is because like 8 people who saw that show said, I saw a guy who dances just like you. Came up to me. Anyhow, what if you like to sell premium? This is just as important, guys. We've been talking about long premium, selling premium. This works too. A lot of people like to sell premium, but it scares them because of the big moves. They sell that straddle and see that giant pyramid at the top. And like, if we don't move, I make 5 grand. Great. But look, if we move down big or up big, that's some scary numbers. I'm staying away from it. The risk reward scares me. Well, knowing how to reverse gamma scalp. Gamma scalp from a position of short premium instead of long premium is what these big firms do. That's why these professional firms are still in business, even in crashes. That's why they're still selling puts, even though they are short puts and are losing a fortune. Their hedges are compensating for it. And that's why you see on day 2 of the class, we have start out with short gamma and just go for the whole day on short gamma. But I'll tell you what, even with my zero DT trades, you guys saw these graphs yesterday in the end of the day update. I didn't bring it up in the end of the day update because it would have prompted too many questions and people would have looked at me like I was Bigfoot, especially people who never heard of gamma scalping. But look at the position I got on in the zero DTE options. That was my risk graph at the end of the day. Does that look like I'm long a straddle? Does that sound like I'm long a straddle or look like I'm long a straddle? And look at all those options. They net out, but it's a straddle for a credit. How does that work? I would just simply head on this massive amount of positions with the office account, explain to the office what who is confused. When you start getting all this stuff, especially when your P&L graphs break down, okay? Sometimes Thinkorswim's P&L graphs break down. You start hedging like call spreads with put spreads to make synthetic butterflies, and their graphs start getting really wonky on you once in a while, especially if you're closing out trades. What is that? If the P&L graph isn't working, how do you manage that? Okay. I've had P&L graphs where this is like this. Well, let me get rid of the fade. Um, where this is the zero line. And I know what my graphs are in my head. I've been doing this so long, I can just put up 20 positions and not look at the P&L graph and know what it looks like. You will get there one day too, and that's like 6 months away from a mental hospital. But I knew I had a position that looked like this. Knew it. I knew this was a small credit. We'll call it 0, just to make it easy, but it was a small credit. But I'm buying, like, the 55-60 call spread and hedging it with the 60-65 put spread, making guts. You guys are familiar with that. And what it does is create a synthetic butterfly that looks like this. But it threw off Thinkorswim's graphs. And then when you look at their graphs, I know my graph looks like this, but what their technology is saying is this is minus 5 grand. This is the 0 line. So now I'm hoping we close right here to break even. No, I disregarded it. And then sometimes all you can go off of is the Greeks. So I was going off of the Greeks and telling the office, hey, it's no big deal. Just go off of the Greeks. You don't have to. It helps. Most people love the P&L graphs, but if you they're broken for some reason, just go off the Greeks and manage this position by the Greeks. And I wouldn't let them look at the P&L graph all day long. They just had to look at their delta, gamma, theta, vegas. And every time the delta got too big, they'd buy a put spread. Every time their delta got too small, they'd buy a call spread. And what did they end up with? This, a straddle for a credit. From what? Gamma scalping. They didn't even know they were gamma scalping, but they were gamma scalping. Okay, so I'm saying this to let you know it comes into practical terms, even if that's not your intent. They didn't know what this position was. I'm short 1, long 3, short 1, long 4, -7, +5, -3, +2, and weird stuff on the put side. Is that condors? It doesn't look anything like it. Doesn't look like butterflies in there, doesn't look like anything. So I can't pick it apart visually. The P&L graph's not working. Just manage the deltas. And like you said, John, I love how scalping long gamma forces you to buy at the bottom when normally you would be scared, and selling at the top when you would be scared. This is all that was going on yesterday. They didn't know what they had going on. All they knew is when the market went down, their deltas were getting massively short, and so they'd go and buy a call spread to get flat. And the opposite market would go up, they'd buy a put spread to get flat. And the next thing they know, they're buying boxes for credits and stuff, bringing the long straddle into getting paid to own a straddle. Cool stuff. All from gamma scalping. It wasn't from any other thing like managing condors and stuff. It was just a mess to them. But I want them to understand a little bit about what we're going to be teaching in the next 3 weeks. So then when questions come in, they got it understood. And what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start recording some of these conversations with these guys because sometimes, like this, I wasn't planning on yesterday this working out so beautifully. Had I recorded it, it would have been a great little add-on for the mini class. I've never done it before, but I think I really should. So anytime I have a little special with the office or something, I'll make sure I record it in case there's a golden nugget of wisdom in there. But the point is, You can even see how it's 0 DTE trading helped. Okay. So in summation, a lot of people love gamma scalping because, especially when volatility is very low, because you know it's eventually going to bounce, or when it's very high because you know it's eventually going to come in. But even if you don't plan on gamma scalping from the traditional avenue where you go out and buy a straddle and just wait for a market to move and hedge and do that every day, you just use it to understand your positions better, use it as a safety valve, or to take whatever current positions you'd like to do and maybe squeak a little bit of money out of it once in a while because you understand the next level trading with these different trades and strategies you do. It's a cool thing to understand. It makes you a much better trader, even if you are not going to do the traditional method of gamma scalping. Now, any questions? Okay, we had a question come in last night or today about gamma scalping leading up to earnings and stocks. Um, I felt it was a great question. I usually have never addressed it before. I have talked about volatility and weighing volatility versus theta on stocks going into an earnings period and how the volatility spike is not really a volatility spike. Um, but I really didn't talk about it in terms of gamma scalping. Someone suggested I bring that into the equation. So we're going to have an extra 45 minutes I'm going to have to fit in there on the class, which is a benefit to you guys, on gamma scalping for stocks going through an earnings cycle. Any other questions? Yeah, yeah. Gamma scalping short options is what I like to do. The majority of floor traders hate buying options unless they think they can time a big move real soon, right? Where they get news and they think they're going to be the first one to see that the war ended and they're going to buy a handful of calls and ride it. But in terms of positions to grind out money, most of the floor traders that I know weren't making their money monthly on long premium. They were making it on short premium and just loving expiration day when all the options disappeared and all the time value disappeared. You know, and there was always Christmas jokes about it. Every expiration, traders were walking around saying, it's Christmas, because they know that the last of the money's coming out of the straddle in terms of time decay in their favor. I love selling volatility because usually when it falls faster than when it goes up. And even if it doesn't fall, the time decay is beating the crap out of the options. So you may sell a straddle on an 18 volatility. A week later, volatility is still on an 18. You haven't made any money on volatility, but you've taken $3 out of the straddle because of time decay. Now the problem is you get a big move, you better know what your delta is to protect that delta. And so we're half of the class is on short gamma. Great question, Lee. Okay, guys. In closing, I know the closer we get to a class, the more excited people get about a class, and all of a sudden they start thinking about questions. And then the day before the class, I get 100 questions coming in. it makes it impossible for me to make slides the day before class. I'm brushing up and cleaning up and making math and grammar double checks and stuff the day before the class. Um, then to add 30 more slides just doesn't get done. So if you got any questions about gamma scoping, do me a favor and try to get them in within the next 2 weeks so that I can do a great job, not a rush to job. Thanks so much, guys. See you bright and early tomorrow morning. Any questions that just didn't come up yet but come up later, feel free to ask. Remember, it's a long weekend, so we'll push and, and tomorrow and work our butts off, knowing we have an extra day to rest. Take care.